Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to participate in this virtual conference, Seamless Saudi Arabia 2020. To start off, there is no doubt that the COVID-19 epidemic has clearly demonstrated its impact at different strategic levels, be it public health, productivity or job losses, and all the way to hibernating global supply chains and consumption. The crisis is simply holding the world in a bottleneck. Nothing seems to work to mitigate the risks associated with this pandemic or to stop the economic freefall. Notably, many are trying to read history to predict the likely future economic scenarios of this outbreak. Some are trying to draw on commonalities with previous crises like the 2008 financial crisis or the Great Depression in the 1930s. However, such comparisons can be argued that they are not valid in today's globalized world, a world that is more interconnected and interdependent more than ever before. Besides, if we read history, all epidemics created paradigm shifts, pushing societies to a new normal. This makes us to say that this is also true in our times, and we all have no choice but to be ready for a new status quo, a new normal that simply requires adaptation and change. Looking at the challenges brought by the pandemic, we clearly see that they are not only presenting significant socio-economic effects, but also creating many unknowns. Evidently, the work and labour markets were hit hardest. We have seen unemployment rates going sky-high figures. Poverty rates around the world are pushing more than 80 million people into extreme poverty and degrading or squeezing middle classes financially. Besides, the continuation of lockdown policies and social distancing measures have extremely disrupted supply chains and led to the falling of consumer demands, which altogether contributed to massive global economic shock. Add to this that these changes are threatening hundreds of millions of companies, large and small firms alike, and the potential failure of certain sectors to fully recover to pre-COVID status. Reading the numbers, recent studies indicate that the potential losses to the global economy of this pandemic over a period of 5 years may range from around $3 trillion in case of a rapid recovery to more than $80 trillion in a deferred recovery scenarios. All in all, current views of recovery scenarios are very much dependent on particular conditions being met. But nobody has a clear answer on the final outcome of this outbreak. All primary scenarios have high likelihood of happening. Although we all hoped in the beginning of the pandemic to have a V-shaped economic recovery with a quick bounce back, there tends to be now a consensus in the international community that recovery is likely to be slower, either a deeper V-shaped recovery or something like a U or L-shaped economic recovery. We believe that the eventual outcomes will be very much dependent on two factors. One is related to virus containment, and the other is related to the approaches and actions taken by the different governments. The world is simply in a dilemma. Opening up the economy means more fatalities. Lockdown means shutting down businesses, job losses, and terrible consequences. It's public health versus economy. The question remains, how do we strike a balance between economy and human well-being? From fiscal policy's standpoint, countries around the world, specifically in advanced and emerging economies, have trended towards the adoption of the Keynesian economic theory, that is through the historic stimulus packages to slow down the free fall of their economies. Others have gone the classical approach, adopting austerity school thinking. Without going into the details of these approaches, history confirms that austerity policies will not be able to address the slow growth levels or the unemployment and social protection issues, which are, in our view, the most important strategic pointers that the political classes and decision makers should be paying attention to. No doubt that the world is in a major economic stalemate. The COVID crisis, joined with the recent remarkable plunge of oil prices and the fluctuating crude oil markets due to the imbalance of global supply and demand chains, are turning the markets on their heads. If we add to this the ongoing Cold Wars between the world powers that are pushing for massive geopolitical consequences and deepening the wounds of the current crisis, again, COVID-19 is driving the global debt close to the peaks, which could stand as a serious menaces once the threat of the pandemic fades. And numerous to counter the strenuous challenges are all considered very heavy baggage on the shoulders of the global economy that will keep dragging all the world economies backwards. I'd like to add to this list also the fragility and inflexibility of current economic systems that just prefer going into recession whenever presented with a challenge, or worse still, its failure in addressing key issues like unemployment. These are a few examples of some of the driving forces pushing for a change in the global economic system. In general, the future global economy outlook is still subject of extensive discussions and interpretations. Nobody has conclusive answers as to the details of the shape and components of its system, but one thing that seems everybody to agree on is that with COVID-19 crisis, the socio-economic system will be different. This is an area that has been under critical research in the Arab Economic Unity Council, in the Arab League, to examine how these inputs will affect and impact the global economic growth. One finding of our research is that the current crisis is speeding the pace of change towards the new global economic system. I'd like to share this short video that outlines our readings in the Arab League of the key traits of post-COVID global economic scenery. So in light of the illustrated predictions of future economy traits, it has become more fundamental that governments pay serious attention to digital transformation. Shutdowns and social distancing measures have proven that traditionally run systems are more vulnerable to crises. In fact, only those who invested in digital solutions were able to navigate through these unprecedented circumstances and maintain some levels of continuity and productivity. We see more firms and governments have come to realize that operating digitally has become a pressing necessity rather than an aspiration. So terms like agility, resiliency, customer centricity, effectiveness and efficiency of operations, be it successful rebound, sustainability and growth, are only possible today through greater and more advanced digitization practices. We have emphasized on this need in our strategic initiative in the Arab League, the Arab Digital Economy Vision, that points out the need for a more holistic approach to tackle current and future challenges and uncertainties. We have highlighted in our work the need to develop a more holistic and innovative regional ecosystem that fosters creativity and accelerates the pace of digital transformation. Traditional brick-and-mortar operating economies won't be able to survive in this rapidly changing world towards deeper digitization. Therefore, the world is likely to witness in the years to come newer and more adaptive business models to enable remote service delivery. And that is where the fourth industrial revolution technologies will come to play a central role. Let's look at this chart. Prior to industrial revolution, global GDP stood at around $2 trillion. Since that time, and with the advent of industrial revolution, the global GDP grew up to $40 trillion until 1993. This is almost $38 trillion over the course of around 120 years. With the advent of the internet, this number increased into 2019 by more than $100 trillion to reach $140 trillion, and this was in less than 27 years. Imagine all this happened during a time span where 2 world wars took place, along with several global epidemics outbreaks, a serious global depression, and numerous to count social and economic disruptions. Therefore, it's logical to say that the world is yet to see another exponential growth in its GDP in the years to come, and that the fourth industrial revolution will spawn not only a new economic form, but will spike the growth patterns. So, in conclusion, unquestionably, COVID-19 epidemic will accelerate the emergence of a new economic world order that will be digitally operated and governed. As such, governments world over are likely to pay high attention to digital transformation as a determinant vehicle to reach out competitiveness and socio-economic goals. Issues related to unemployment and economic growth would not be possible to be tackled with classical approaches, but with rather more innovative, persistent, and result-oriented mindset. Such change would also require governments to redefine their roles and adopt more dynamic and resilient strategies, structures, and governance systems. These systems should focus on diversification of the economy, raising productivity levels and production capabilities, and taking advantage of the potentials of the advanced technologies in order to transform vital sectors like health, education, work, retail and commerce, and large economic industries like entertainment and tourism. To a large extent, the actions taken by the governments today will determine the future of their societies. With this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you for your patience and listening. Stay safe and be prepared for the new economy. Thank you.